Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. I have Adam Green with me tonight. Adam is going to be simulcasting. Hey, Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jan, good to be here. Yeah, I'm live streaming at No More News as well, so we're gonna get a double the audience tonight on the live stream.
And I just called this a conversation with Adam Green. I don't know what Adam, if Adam named it the same, it would sound ridiculous on his channel. So I'm sure he'll come up with something good for his side. So anyway, today we're just going to have a conversation. We didn't even really prepare an outline or whatever. So just kind of chat and field questions from the audience, talk about whatever we want to talk about tonight. So, and the nice thing about that is people usually like that anyway.
Yeah, so let me just introduce real quick who I'm speaking with tonight for my audience. For those of it that don't know you, you are Jan Irvin with Logos Media, and that's formerly of Gnostic Media, if people remember you from that.
Correct.
And what was why did you change? I'm sure you've explained it a bunch of times already, but I'm curious what made you change.
Well, I've just doing so much research regarding the trivium and truth and everything, and coming to an understanding of what logos or the word means, which is reason or truth, and it's where we derive the word logic from. I just decided that Logos Media better depicted the direction that I want to go now than Gnostic Media did. So
Was it E. Michael Jones that kind of was a big influence behind this like new Logos way of thinking and the change?
I was already onto it. I just had him on right at about the same time, and he had already been talking about it. And I just said, hey, why not have Professor Jones on to kind of explain what it is, help people along with the idea.
Right. Yeah. You sent me some of those interviews and I watched those, and I just wanted to share. I just picked this up. So this is a super thick one here.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get that. So, yeah, that's E. Michael Jones is a great interview, so you should definitely have him on the show.
And he was kind enough to even give me a signature there.
How about that?
So thank you, E. Michael Jones. I'm going to be reading this, and I'm going to be expert on the topic, I'm sure.
I've had him on the show, I suppose 3 times if you include RBN and past different shows I've done. But yeah, he's a great interview, and the audience loves him too. And he doesn't, he doesn't BS you. He gets right to the point on things. So, and once you get it, almost all revolutions, when you dig into it, whether it's the cultural revolution or the psychedelic revolution or the Bolshevik revolution or whatever, you'll find Judaism behind it, and that's, it's not being anti-Semitic or anti-Arab if you want to get into the details of that, but it's just being factual. So, it's just, if people are afraid to look behind the veil of the word anti-Semitism, it's a buzzword that's thrown out to prevent people from looking at things. And you and I have both been accused of being Jewish. That's one of the things that they love to level at us. And, we both had Chris Hersey, attack us and spin every single thing. And you did a rebuttal and used some of the stuff that he pulled. But yeah, no matter what I said, he just spun it. It was just like, yeah, you're an idiot. But
yeah.
These guys, they start exposing themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on E. Michael Jones, I've had a lot of requests for him to come on, and I'm going to try to do an interview with him soon. You mentioned the psychedelic revolution. You've done a lot of research in that, and that's actually how I started with all of your old work, like your sacred mushroom and the Santa presentations from
the Holy Mushroom was my second book. Yeah.
The Holy Mushroom, yeah. And so how was the psychedelic revolution influenced by Judaism? Didn't you mention that earlier?
Oh, well, so good grief. Well, here, I'll just show you.
Yeah. I know Gordon Wasson went down to Mexico and
about
did the mushroom.
So about 9-10 years ago, I started this book project. This is a 1,000-page book project that I never published because about 2/3 of the way through it. See, what I had done is when I launched this show, which was 10 years ago next month, I started off interviewing about 55 of the world's leading psychedelic experts and scholars. And so as I'm interviewing all of these folks and going through and I'm transcribing it all and everything, it's, you start recognizing patterns in things. And how many times do people have to, different doctors and professors and writers and researchers, when you're interviewing them, how many of them have to mention their Jewish grandmother or drop something like that in the interview? And you start seeing the pattern. It was like, okay, wait a second, and I'll just throw this out there, but it was in 2008, right around the same time I launched the show, and I was still fighting all of my stomach issues. This was before I went to the hospital in Peru for 5-6 days, but I had just seen Buchenwald, A Dumb Dumb Portrayal of Evil, and I think I had watched 1/3 of the Holocaust right at about that same time as well. And, there was just, I had just gotten the trivium, and there was just so much grammar and so much evidence, and it was such there was so much overwhelming research provided in those that I just went, wow. And then I started seeing the connections and things. So I had already been investigating Gordon Wasson because of my 2008 book, and I was tracking him, and I knew in 2007, I had figured out that he was CIA, but I couldn't prove it until, let me take off these cheap reader glasses. I just had LASIK surgery, so my eyes are still all jacked and out of focus right now, especially up close. But so it was in 2007 I figured out that Wasson was CIA, but when I published my book in 2008, I didn't have the evidence to prove it yet. And so I kept that out of the book and just kept gathering information, but I was on the trail during this whole time. And then in 2011 or 2012, I published Gordon Wasson, The Man, the Legend, the Myth. And so what happened was within a week of publishing that, so I was a pretty well-recognized expert in the field of ethnomycology, letters from Purdue University recognizing my research and this kind of stuff. And so within a week of publishing that, a week to 10 days, I would say, all of my research and academic friends, professors, doctors, amateur researchers and writers, they all turned on me in chorus. And not one of them ever addressed a single citation that I published, and many of them were from Yale, from Harvard, from Stanford, from Columbia, from, all of these various places. Not one of them would address the actual research. They all turned and attacked me. And so that was when I kind of said, and I had the trivium by now. And so, wait, and so when you're a writer and a researcher, one thing that you understand when somebody gives you something to read, they want your honest feedback about what it actually says. And, this point here, here's a spelling or a grammar error. This footnote here is wrong. It should be this. But so you have 60, 65, maybe 70 researchers, professors, etc. They're all researchers and writers. And suddenly all of them couldn't address a single point in the research. They all started ad hominem me.
And what was the research that was so controversial that they were all disagreeing with the logical fact?
Well, and I'll just show it on screen here. The article, all I did was publish the article itself. And so it was the article itself. Nothing was really controversial in it. But it's for those who want to go to the website and find it, you click on this, and The Secret History of Magic Mushrooms is right here. And if you scroll down just a little bit here, the article starts right here. Gordon Wasson, The Man, the Legend, the Myth. And so here's what upset everybody at the CIA was beginning a new history of magic mushrooms, ethnomycology, and the psychedelic revolution. So if Wasson had faked all of his research, as I was beginning to expose in the series, which ended up going much deeper over the years, then it overturned the entire field. So every professor, every researcher, every writer, everything that was published previous, it was all wrong. And so initially I just thought that it was poor research and, they had just not checked the primaries. But then when the chorus came down on my head, all of them within a week to 10 days trying to get me back into line, saying, oh, Jan, you've lost it this time. Oh, you didn't, ask our opinion on this. You didn't let us peer review this first. You didn't, let us tell you what to think. I'm the one who went through the primary citations. I'm the one who went through the Princeton, the Columbia, the Yale archives. I'm the one who pulled all the documentation. Why the hell would I need their opinion to tell me what all of these letters, from the CIA and from the Council on Foreign Relations, et cetera, between Wasson and Alan Dulles and all these people said? I read them. They were the ones who screwed up and failed to present this research accurately for, 60 years from the time the field was founded. To that point. So, why would I care about their opinions? And when none of them could address any of the points and it just attacked me all in chorus, then I just had to sit back and say, wait a second, they're using appeal to ridicule, they're using ad hominems. They're all researchers and writers, but yet not one of them can say, well, this point is wrong or this point is wrong. It was just all blah! So I had to start looking at all of them. And then I started going through everybody in the field's research and checking their citations. And it was like, oh, well, they're all just citing each other. And these are all different academic cells, and none of them are citing the primaries. And I started getting into like the Florentine Codex and finding the primary citations that, on the Aztecs and everything. And when I looked at all of those, it was clear that this was an Aztec mushroom death cult and not this spiritual new agey crap that everybody was being told. In fact, I'll just pull up a couple of quotes on that just so people can get an idea of what I really found there. And so these were the original citations, and all of the books in the entire field of ethnomycology, and I have about 22 or 24 shelf feet of just books on psychedelics and ethnomycology, and I've read 90+% of them.
You are a huge expert, a leading expert in psychedelics, and a big advocate and researcher and historian. Didn't you actually give Joe Rogan his first DMT?
Yeah, I did. Biggest mistake I ever made. And then Joe, in 2011, I was on his show, and he spun all of my research and attacked me and interrupted to tell dick jokes the entire interview. It's probably one of the worst 5 interviews I've ever had, if not the number one worst. But so let me just give you a couple of these just so that you get an idea, so that the audience can. And this is directly out of the Florentine Codex. These are Aztec informants. This was published in the late 15, early 1600s. The lewd youth is a madman. He goes about drinking crude wine, a drunkard, foolish, dejected, a drunk, a sot. He goes about eating mushrooms. He goes about demented. He is restless, dissolute, shameless, presumptuous, lewd, tattling, wicked, a vile brute, brazen. He is impudent. He consumes his inner substance. He is vain, proud, debauched, a pleasure seeker, a libertine, revolting, filthy, vicious, a keeper of mistresses, a talker. He lives in concubinage. He is given to pleasure. And that's from Book 10, The People, page 37. And another thing I found in going through that is all of the other researchers had provided fake or misleading citations to where each of these quotes were located in the Florentine Codex, which is 13 books. I want to just read one more of these because this one is my favorite. And just imagine your typical hippie girl today as I'm reading this one. So this is the harlot, the carnal woman, and this is from Book 10, page 55. The carnal woman is an evil woman who finds pleasure in her body, who sells her body, repeatedly sells her body, an evil woman or an evil old woman, besotted, drunk, very drunk, much besotted, dejected, perverse, like a sacrificial victim, a bathed slave, a captive full of affliction, mortal. She consumes her inner substance, a brazen, a proud, a dissolute woman, a debauched life, a fraud, gaudy, fastidious, vain, petty. She is oblivious of what all know her to be, a petty old woman, a free yielder of herself, a whore from the brothel, a deflowered one, a lascivious old woman of itching buttocks, an old woman of itching buttocks, an aged woman, a flabby old woman, a filthy one, a filthy old dog who brings herself to ruin like a dog. She parades, she moves lasciviously, she is pompous wherever she seduces. Howsoever she sets her heart on one, she brings him to ruin. She makes herself beautiful, arrays herself, she is haughty, appears like a flower, looks gaudy, arrays herself gaudily. She views herself in a mirror, carries a mirror in her hand, she bathes, she takes a sweat bath, she washes herself, she anoints herself with axen, constantly anoints herself with axen. She lives like a base slave, acts like a sacrificial victim, goes about with her head high, rude, drunk, shameless, eating mushrooms. She paints her face, variously paints her face. Her face is covered with rouge. Her cheeks are colored. Her teeth are darkened, rubbed with cochineal. Half of her hair falls loose. Half is wound about her head. She arranges her hair like horns. She goes about haughtily, shamelessly, head high, vain, filthy, given to pleasure. She lives in vice. So, I mean, that is your atypical fornicating in the mud at Woodstock hippie.
Sounds like an Insta whore.
Right. And so when I got in and I actually, Gordon Wasson, Terrence McKenna, Jonathan Ott, you go right down the list. It didn't matter who of these, John W. Allen, all of these guys, they would mention these citations in the Florentine Codex and then talk about how the Aztecs had this beautiful mushroom religion. But again, those are Nahuatl or Aztec informants to Father Sahuagin. So looking at
didn't they make up the history about ayahuasca as well? Like it wasn't really like a old 1,000-year-old tradition.
Yeah, as far as we can tell, it was only used to purge stomach parasites, and so if we get into let me just pull that up here on the and I should probably be sharing screen so your audience can see this as well, but I don't know, they might have to look at mine, but the Santo Daime and what's the other one? The Uno de Vegetal were both Jose Gabriel da Costa and the other one from Raimundo Ireneo Sierra Maestro. So these guys were who founded the Santo Daime and the Uno de Vegetal, and they both worked for the rubber companies, ironically, the rubber tapping industry. So, they literally created that. Now, and, for instance, with peyote, there is evidence that the Huichol Indians in northern Mexico used it. Maybe the Yaqui Indians may have used it. You can't believe anything that Carlos Castaneda or those guys say. They were all working for the CIA, as I've exposed over the years on the show. But Kawana Parker, who was was it Cherokee chief? He was friends with Roosevelt, and they coupled Protestantism with peyote religion, and then launched that to the Native Americans in around 1891. Before the 1850s, there is no evidence of Native Americans, aside from the Huichol and possibly the Yaqui, using peyote as a religious sacrament. All of that is post-1850s and especially post-1891. And so when you look up, Kawana Parker and all of this, and let me see if I can pull him up in the database. So Kawana Parker, his mom was Cynthia Ann Parker. She was kidnapped by the Indians, and she was raised by them. His father was the chief, Peta Nakana. And so, but he launches the Native American Church in 1891, essentially. So, most people think that this is the ancient religion of the Native Americans. This is the ancient religion of the Mazatecs and Maria Sabina. This is the ancient religion of the Aztecs. This is the ancient religion of the Peruvians and the Colombians and the Brazilians, et cetera. And they set up the ayahuasca retreats and the go to what is it? The Mazatec. Oh, geez. Now the name just slipped me. Their little village, but with the Mazatec, what they don't mention in Mexico, which is where the psilocybe mushrooms come from, what they don't tell us is that they were relocated, and that, Wasson started that whole thing in 1951, 1953, after a dam project was built, and the whole tribe had been relocated. So, of course, the entire field of ethnobotany and ethnomycology omits that, except, I think, for one Mexican scholar mentions that, and I've talked about him before. Now I'm forgetting his name, and he's on the shelf in the other room. But so that's how all of this stuff. Eventually, you're going to have to let me ask you some questions too, there, Adam.
I had a follow-up question on that. So you were doing all this research into hallucinogens and psychedelics, and then your research led you that all these guys are from like the Royal Institute, and they're all
Royal Society, Frankfurt School, Fabians, SRI, Tavistock, your usual social engineering groups. But I started, once I pulled the corner of the rug up investigating Gordon Wasson, that was really, once I had that little corner up, it was like, okay. And then, we get in and we find the MK Ultra documents that Wasson was MK Ultra Subproject 58. The CIA slips one document in there to try to misdirect people, but then you can get in there and you can see from all of the documents that there is no way that he wasn't directly involved in the project. And then we start seeing private letters between him and Alan Dulles inviting him to come and visit him next time he's in Washington, etc. And this is within, I'm just looking for some of these citations, but they're in the database. For those of you who want to pull them up, you can click on them under Gordon Wasson and just go through them there. But, so this guy...
So the whole psychedelic revolution and like the deadhead movement, was that like the establishment's way of like co-opting and controlling the counterculture?
No, they didn't co-opt it. They manufactured it.
Yeah.
It's all Moloch and Pan worship. It's all Baal worship. It's all.
You talking about the music?
And when all of it. You do the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia, Phil Lesh, Bob Weir. I've got video. I've released it of Bob Weir admitting that they were, that he was working with the company and they were doing experiments. I've got, all of these guys. Bob Weir admitting that he was at Bohemian Grove, slapping him back with General Bill McQuinn, hanging out there, and he loves to hang out there. Another one was Sasha Shulgin, the inventor of ecstasy or MDMA and half the street drugs out there today. He was working for the DEA, and he was also Bohemian Grove. But here are these guys working for Bohemian Grove, but they manufactured the whole thing. Peggy Mellon Hitchcock of the Mellon banking family, her brother Billy owned the Millbrook Mansion that Leary and Ralph Metzner and those guys did all of their experiments for the CIA at Hitchcock's mansion. But Peggy Mellon Hitchcock funded the Grateful Dead's first album. That's the Mellon banking family. I've been to the house there in New York, where they did all of their CIA experiments and stuff at the Millbrook Mansion. I've taken photographs of it. Now they have a new house on the property on the other end, this massive 60,000 foot house, if you want to call it. It's the biggest thing you've ever seen, but absolutely incredible, this huge place.
So now you discourage all people from using psychedelics, and because what's the term? Is it suggestogens or?
Yeah, I wrote this article, and I'll just show it here. It's called "Entheogens: What's in a Name?" And in that article, basically while I was researching this article, it came across me that what they did was they had to market the drugs using different names. And originally they were hallucinogens, then they went to psychotomimetic, and then to psychedelic, and then to entheogens. And what I discovered, it was the same group of about 5 or 6 people who created all the names, and there was 2 teams. But at the end of that article, the word suggestion kept coming up, and it was especially because of Marlene Darius's writings in here. But she mentions that, and I'm just looking for it here. Hold on a second. She mentioned psychedelic substances like ayahuasca create a state of hypersuggestibility in which persons are very open to being influenced by others. Many traditional cultures have utilized this condition to inculcate cultural values and behaviors in young people as they receive initiation into adulthood. In the West, countercultural values can be inculcated in young people when using these psychedelics, especially when using them in an antinomian context. Now, that word antinomian is key. That's a word batted around in Salem by Anne Hutchinson and Cotton Mather and John Cotton and the Jewish Puritans there who were attacking Christianity and logos, or reason, as true, or truth as God. And so they didn't want people to follow natural law regarding, especially Christianity, because Christianity in its true form is natural law. That's what the laws of Moses are. It's just natural law. It's just another way of saying natural law. So they wanted people to reject logos or following natural law. So that's what antinomian is those who are against the law. And so, she's admitting there that they can promote the use of psychedelics in the counterculture to inculcate the youth against following natural law. Boom. So she says the whole thing. And then...
and what benefit do they get from people not following the natural law? Like, why do they want that?
If you're trying to recreate the fall, or sell the fall, or market the fall, and you want everybody else caught up in iniquitous, degenerate behavior, fornicating in the mud to their rock idols, again, graven images, rock idols, get the joke. So if you're fornicating in the mud like at Woodstock to your rock idols, and even if you drive into Woodstock today where they had the concerts, they even show Pan playing the flute there. Well, Pan is the god goat, that lures all the kids and stuff. I mean, they put this stuff right in your face. So they want to recreate the fall. And that's, so I started finding quotes from Leary and from Aldous Huxley and all of these guys discussing just exactly this. So then, I hadn't read the Bible in years at that point, and I was like, wow. But so I'm just going to show this quote from the article here so people can see this. Not to cover your face there, but these are evolutionary matters, and this is between Tim Leary and Aldous Huxley. Of course, I've exposed that Aldous Huxley was one of the key architects of the CIA's MKUltra program, and he was a very sick, disgusting individual, and all of these psychopaths that work in Intel still to this day worship this creep. But these are evolutionary matters. They cannot be rushed. Work privately. Initiate artists, writers, poets, jazz musicians, elegant courtesans, painters, rich bohemians, and they'll initiate the rich. That is how everything of culture and beauty and philosophic freedom has been passed on. Your role, speaking to Tim Leary, is quite simple. Become a cheerleader for evolution. That is what I did and my grandfather before me. Okay, no joke there, since his grandfather, Thomas Henry Huxley, was literally the PR man for Charles Darwin. So become a cheerleader for evolution. And that's exactly what he and his grandfather and Julian Huxley and all of the Huxleys since, that's what they all do. That's the family business, is to promote this sick agenda. These brain drugs, mass-produced in laboratories, will bring about vast changes in society. This will happen with or without you or me. All we can do is spread the word. The obstacle to this evolution, Timothy, is the Bible. And then Tim says, I don't remember any discussion of brain change drugs in the Bible. And then Huxley, Timothy, have you forgotten the very first chapters of Genesis? Jehovah says to Adam and Eve, I've built you this wonderful resort eastward of Eden. You can do anything you want, except you are forbidden to eat the fruit of the tree. Tim, the first controlled substances. Huxley, exactly. The Bible begins with fruit and drug prohibitions. Leary, so the fall and original sin were caused by the taking of illegal drugs. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that's what they always promote right there. By this, and then Timothy says, by this time, Aldous was chuckling away, very pleased with himself, and I was rolling on the floor with laughter. You know, and this is the foundation of MKUltra. You know, and Leary admits that he was CIA, and I've tracked so much. In fact, I'll just show folks with Aldous Huxley. If you go into the brain database and just click on the top here, all of these bright red ones are hardcore CIA and MI6 personnel that we've already exposed. Ram Dass, Timothy Leary, Ken Kesey, Michael Murphy, the Esalen Institute, Tim Leary, Humphrey Osmond, Carlos Castaneda. Here's Alan Dulles, Aleister Crowley. You got the Fabians in there. There's Thomas Huxley. These are the elite social engineers, folks. This is who creates and manufactures this stuff. So once I figured all of this out, I published it. You know, and the biggest mistake the CIA and all of these clowns made when I published this research was, you know, if they had just patted me on the back for exposing Wasson and said, good job, I would have said, oh, okay, good job. Well, you know, I proved that, and, you know, thanks, guys, and, you know, thanks for the encouragement for my good research, and I would have gone about my way. But it was because they all attacked me in chorus, the whole field, and not one of these guys. You know, we would have all of these conversations discussing research point by point, and here's a citation. So when a whole field of academia suddenly can't do that, you got a question, especially when you've read all of the research and documents. So it was their attack that made me realize that they were all complicit in this, and then I started investigating anyone.
And there's a massive conspiracy, right?
And they were all involved. Yeah, it was all of the key heroes of the psychedelic revolution, all of the big professors in it, all of the big researchers and writers in it. They were all in it, and I didn't get the memo. And I wasn't supposed to publish that, and I did, and that was when I figured it all out. And they tried to, you know, coax me back into the herd and get me back in line. And when I saw them doing that, you know, then that was when I just came out exposing everything. And so I've been attacked relentlessly for doing that ever since, you know. So they've infiltrated me. They've put people on me that I thought were friends, etc., people that I worked with, former co-hosts, people that I've had on the show, and a lot of these ended up being dirty over the years. But, you know, until you get into the trivium and understanding how these operations work, it's really, you know, difficult to see these things.
So Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, and there was like the soma drug in there that kind of like made the population like numb
and then
dumb.
Gordon Wasson wrote Soma, the Divine Mushroom of Immortality. You know, I think what was it? Not Brave New World, but Doors of Perception was probably the first book published by the CIA and MKUltra. And then Wasson publishes Soma, the Divine Mushroom of Immortality, following up with Wasson, or with Huxley laying down Soma in Brave New World and in Doors of Perception as this opener and saying, you know, your five senses are bad. You have to shut off any knowledge from the five senses, and you just have to go inward. You know, the world is a delusion. You got to believe me and Jiddu Krishnamurti and the CIA and what we tell you to think. You know, you can't trust your five senses. You can't know anything. It's a quantum world. In fact, you know, like Einstein worked with Julian Huxley. You know, both of those two were frauds. Huxley, Julian, a major eugenicist behind UNESCO, the World Wildlife Fund, all of these things to promote eugenics and MKUltra from the other angle. And part of this stuff was promoting homosexuality, transgender, and all of this stuff. So then, you know, it was just that tug pulling on Wasson. And once I saw that, I began to see the rest of it. And again, if they didn't act in chorus like a bunch of idiots, I would have just said, well, I did good work on Wasson, and I would have gone, you know, back to bed and with a smile on my face and thought that was the end of it. But, you know, So
what motivated the Huxleys to do all this stuff? Like,
well,
what
I don't know,
them?
Zionism, Darwinism, selfish megalomania, psychopathology. I can't think of any other reason why they would do this. I mean, after King Charles I was thrown out, and they brought in King Charles II, and Oliver Cromwell and all of them had everybody under thumb, and the Royal Society had everybody under control. It's just all social engineering. They wanted to control the narrative. They wanted to take people away from realizing that truth is God, and they wanted to sell the biggest lie ever called scientism, and they roll it out with the Royal Society. My wife Holly and I have gone into this extensively, exposing the Royal Society and how they manufactured all of the scientism that, Einstein's crap. You look at John Bjerkney's work on Einstein, the manufacture and sale of St. Einstein, etc. Einstein's work is garbage, and this is the foundation of modern science and physics and all of this stuff,
Christopher John Burkiss, that's who you're talking about, that wrote the books on Einstein?
Yeah.
Have you interviewed him on your show?
I've not. I wrote him once, maybe a year or two ago, trying to get him on. I never heard back. I would love to get him on, though.
Yeah, he covers a lot of the stuff that I've been covering on my channel recently with like Chabad Lubavitch and like the end times prophecy, the end game of Zionism. You said that Huxley was a Zionist, but what was their like end game goal? Was it like Brave New World?
Well, it's the ultimate revolution. He calls it straight up the ultimate or the final revolution, where the elites have total control. They want alphas, betas, deltas, epsilons, which is what they create through the vaccines. We started figuring out that the vaccines, who was actually the witches group, folks, it's almost October. Please do not worship, follow, celebrate Halloween this year. The cauldron is how they made the poisons to create the plagues, and they would use children to test these things. They used the candy to lure the kids to the door. The symbolism is right there in front of your faces, folks, and then they get us to celebrate this stuff every year, and they're mocking us. This is how they created the Black Death across Europe, that the Jews were accused of spreading, that caused the death of 60 to 70 million Europeans. And this is where the term poisoning the well comes from. And they, Holly and I figured out that they were using mercury ore. Excuse me as I drink San Pellegrino and have to burp. But mercury ore, which is called cinnabar. And so we discovered, they were using cinnabar, feces, spiders, snake, frog poisons, anything that was considered dark, decaying, death, etc. It went into these brews. And so this is bragged about in Macbeth, boil, boil, toil and trouble. This, so they put it right on our faces, but they would make these poison brews and then put mercury and all of this other stuff in them and then go pour them in wells. And wherever the Marranos, which is a word for crypto-Jews, wherever they went, they would poison the wells, poison the water system, and you would have these plagues. And then what they would do is they would point over at the Christians and the Europeans for causing it each and every time over and over, whether it was the Pequots, whether it was the Maya and the Meso and South Americans, the Inca, etc. This Cortez, this is how they rolled it out each time. And then they would wait till a certain number of people died, and then, they would wipe out 40% of the men, and then there were the survivors that wouldn't get killed by whatever disease, and then they would roll in, and they would easily conquer a territory, and then they would point at everybody else to take the blame. That's exactly what they did with the Salem witch trials. The Puritans were, as far as I can tell, they were Marranos, they were crypto-Jews, and they followed the Tanakh, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They weren't Christian. To be a Christian, you have to follow the New Testament. That doesn't mean that they weren't versed enough in it to cite it, to cover their butts. It just means that, you don't promote antinomianism at the same time you're claiming to be a Christian, because that's antithetical to Christianity. You can't live in truth and be antithetical to truth and natural law at the same time. So, so we started figuring out that this is what happened. And in my opinion, from all the research that we've done, it appeared that the Puritans were actually Jewish. And I've got, many dozens of citations, maybe hundreds, that show these references. But or these
I've
connections.
cited your research in my videos several times, and sometimes you've told me I've gotten it a little bit wrong. But here's the article that I always show. It's more than hocus pocus, and it talks about how they called Salem is named after Jerusalem, and it was called Christian Israel, or the New Zion. So it's like,
Exactly right.
we
Well,
always,
and they ran out the Christians that originally founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now I'm forgetting the guy who originally founded it, but they ran them out, and each group that was contrary, they went and took over. They took over Maine, etc. Maine, they would kill people, and I don't want to get names mixed up. So Holly and I need to get back to working on the book, so all of that stuff is fresh in my mind. So
you have a name for the book?
Salem Solved is the working title right now. But, so what they did is they committed all of this. They used mercury ore or cinnabar to poison the kids. Holly and I went through and made a chart of all of the symptoms claimed by the Salem victims. And most of them were accused by women and girls, by the way, not men, for all of you who think, oh, they were suppressing men suppressing women. And it was that suppressive Christianity. They weren't Christians to begin with. The spell that was cast by the Puritans was against the Christians. The Christians had nothing to do with it as far as we can tell. But the Christians took the blame for 326 years.
And the witch hunts and like the witch burnings, is that, do you think that was based somehow on their Judaism?
Well, witchcraft comes from Judaism, and there was one of them, Anne Hutchinson's friend, who is accused of witchcraft, and she was caught with mandrake, of all things. And of course, mandrake is a scopolamine-based plant from the Mediterranean used in Jewish witchcraft. So what the heck is somebody in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1680s or 90s, what is she doing with mandrake all the way in the in the colonies at the time, and doing this stuff and performing sex rituals?
Scopolamine, that's a devil's breath, right? The super dangerous one.
It's absolutely terrible, and that's in Colombia and places like that. It's the pure form. They'll blow it in somebody's faces, and it causes such a high rate of suggestibility that somebody who puts this crap on you, they can, let's say you're going home, you're leaving someplace, and somebody blows some of this on you. And you go home, they can tell you to unlock your home, and they can pull up a truck in front of your house, and you will help them unload all of your stuff from your house into their truck, and they will drive away with all of your stuff, and nobody will ask anything because everybody sees you out there helping them because they don't know you're under the influence of scopolamine. So this stuff is it's a really hardcore drug, but it's also in, Jimson weed or, Datura, belladonna, I think is scopolamine based. But, so these are the witches' plants, and the psychedelics are also the witches' plants. They cause hypersuggestibility, as I read Professor Marlene Darius's quote earlier, and I had her back on the show many years ago. And she was one of the only ones, I think right before her death, she was dying of cancer. And I think she started feeling guilty for what she had done and promoting psychedelics and ayahuasca. She was really one of the first who promoted ayahuasca. But she had written a book right before she died, a tea laced with ayahuasca, a tea laced with controversy. Basically, I think questioning and feeling guilty about all of her earlier work. And saying, don't go to South America and do this. I mean, nobody listened to her. I certainly didn't at the time. But, she was one of the only ones, I think, that began to feel remorse and start to backpedal on her life's work as a, CIA shill. She was, and you were probably just drove past it today. She was, professor of anthropology at Cal State Fullerton.
So on the psychedelics, you kind of went from one extreme to another, and then something similar happened with you with veganism, correct?
Oh yeah, well I was a vegan and vegetarian for years, and that landed me in the ICU. You know, stupidest thing I ever did was become a vegan. I mean, when you realize that your brain is made out of like 77% cholesterol, as is your reproductive system, and
Mm-hmm.
every cell in your body is made up of fat, why the heck are they selling us the low fat, low cholesterol diet? And eat lots of healthy whole grains. You know, and
Yeah,
whole
I
grains
love
are,
what you call it. Your term for it,
what's that?
slave food,
Oh yeah, well yeah, it
right?
is. It is. Grains are the slave food. That's what they fed the pigs and the cattle and stuff, right? So
Mhm.
that's what they used to feed you, fatten you up right before the slaughter. So you look at all of those obese people out there today. I mean, America's fatter than we've ever been, and all the sheep are ready for the slaughter. You know.
Yeah. And here I wanted to show people. Oh shoot, I lost it. But you commented on the debate I had with Owen Schroyer from Infowars last week, and you had one of the top comments, and it was you're pointing out some of the logical fallacies that he did in the debate, and that's something that you really specialize in. I've learned a lot about them from you, and you talk about logical fallacies more than anybody else that I've been listening to. So is that a specific part of the trivium, which you also get
Yeah,
into?
well, it's yeah. There's your data gathering, which is your knowledge, and
Mhm.
you know that's all of the grammar, the parts that you're dealing with. I usually use the analogy of the car. It's just simple, and we're dudes. Excuse me, all the ladies. You can shift this, just change it to kitchen stuff and cooking a meal. So, you know, for those of you who haven't been destroyed by CIA glorious Steinem feminism, and you know, so you take a car, and let's say you take it apart, and you're working on your car out in the driveway or the garage. All of the parts of the car are laid out on the driveway. That's all of the grammar, the parts that you're dealing with of any topic. And then the logic aspect would be putting all of those parts together. You put the key in the ignition, and the thing starts. You don't have any contradictions. You put it in gear, it actually runs. So everything is working without contradiction. You understand the why. You understand all of the parts going together. And then the rhetoric aspect would be like the Chilton's manual of working on your own car. And the Chilton's manual is all the rhetoric of how you took the parts, put them together, and got everything to work without contradiction. So it's grammar, logic, and rhetoric, or input, processing, and output. And what the social engineers try to do, yeah, and for somebody, whoever mentioned Jordan Maxwell in the chat, that guy is completely corrupt and dirty. That's just my opinion for anybody who's listentitious, but, or, you know, and Sue Happy, but, you know, Jordan Maxwell, if you look up on the government's own website, is a convicted fraud. But anyway, going on, where was I?
So oh here let me show what you said. Oh, it moved now. Here we go. Control F.
Boy, we're almost an
Logo.
hour done. I haven't even read the chat at all tonight. And please, ladies and gentlemen, support the show, support Adam's show as well. We need all the support we can get. Please support on Patreon, or let me post the link for supporting the show. Much appreciated. We do this on our own. I'm not like getting commercial funding. I don't work for any agencies, government or otherwise. I never worked for any CIA or DIA or FBI or any of those agencies like all these people out there do that tell you how wonderful these drugs are. But yeah, please support the show out there and do what you can so that we can continue to put this work out there. Boy, I don't see any contributors tonight.
Oh, let me see if I have any super chats. Yeah. Here's one. My friend OD'd on psilocybin. He is insane now. That's from producer Chris. Okay, and then here's another one. One thing I'm tired of hearing about is Stefan Molyneux IQ test scores from around the world. Who, in brackets, put together this information? Jews, of course. You got to take on all the people talking recently about how they're really pushing that the Ashkenazi Jews are the smartest race, and this explains why they're overrepresented
E. Michael
everywhere.
Jones shows how they faked a lot of the tests and entrance exams for Harvard and stuff, and he's really good for showing how they faked that stuff. But you know, I don't know about the IQ tests themselves. There are certain groups who can't pass them well over other groups who do. You know, you can't just cry victim every time. You do have to look at some of this stuff objectively as well. But you know, it's like anything else. Usually, you know, you can't just scapegoat everything. Essentially.
So here is your comments here on this video. Logos Media. Owen's favorite fallacies are the red herring straw man, also uses ad hominems and appeal to ridicule. Yeah, when he was trying to laugh at me.
Yeah, well, every time you said anything, he called you crazy. You know, it's like, well,
Right.
we're gonna anybody who thinks that, they're crazy. Never mind. Every time you know, track a citation, it leads that direction. You know, and it's like, okay, you know, start paying. If you don't believe this, folks out there in the audience, and you know, just start paying attention to people's last names. And once you start doing that, you start seeing a pattern. You know, are they Gonzaleses or Hamiltons, or are they, you know, Steins and Goldbergs and things like that? And when you know,
and Greenberg,
etc. And when you,
that's why I get called a Jew all the time. But it's not, Green is not just Ashkenazi Jew. It's also Irish and English, very common surnames.
Absolutely, it is. You know,
and the Jews actually, when they took their last names, took a lot of Gentile names to kind of fit in also.
Well, and that's, you know, what they did also is they, you know, to be crypto, they changed their names. But, you know, when they came from Europe, a lot of them changed their names to hide, you know, amongst everybody so that they didn't stand out, you know, and so they would adopt genteel names. So a lot of people don't get that. But when you start tracking the names, you begin to see the patterns, and it's like, all right, how many times do I have to see the same thing play out before I
every
get the big
single
picture?
time is the saying when something happens and it turns out that it's you know, the usual suspects. That's the saying on Twitter every single time.
Well, you know, and so that's exactly what happened when I started doing that massive book project. It's like, wait a second, you know. So I interview 55, 60 or so of the world's leading experts in the field of ethnobotany and psychedelic drugs, and like 70 or 80% of them were Jewish, but they represent like 1 or 2% of the population. There were no blacks. There was one. Not that I interviewed, but I only knew of 1 or 2 Latinos in the entire field. And there were a couple of white guys, and everybody else in the field were Jewish, you know, or homosexual, you know. So that was a big tell as well. So it's like, okay, you're rejecting logos. And so once you reject logos, once you know that truth is God and you reject it, thanks everybody for the super chats. Thank you, Candor. Thank you, George. Hey, George. Good to see you, man. I hope you send me another Trivium shirt, George. And thanks so much for the first one. Thank you, Reese. Thank you, everyone, for throwing up the super chats just now. Really appreciate the support. And, you know, but once you start seeing the pattern, it just becomes self-evident. But you can't think with emotion. If you shirk and run away every time you hear the word anti-Semitism, or if you hear the word Holocaust and you run the other direction, then you're never going to get it. You know, you're never going to peer behind the curtain. You have to, you know, get beyond the emotional triggers. Right. You know, so get beyond the mental triggers that keep you, you know, that make you have an emotional response, to look at it and be fact-based. That's what the Trivium is for. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And the Trivium doesn't care about your emotions. Your emotions don't bear on the facts. You can use your emotions to get angry and go do the research, but you know, use it to achieve something, not just to run the other direction and say, well, I can't look there, you know. So
I want to talk to you a little bit about trolls. You know, being on YouTube and putting your face out there online, we're always inundated with trolls in every which direction. That's actually how we both got baited into doing interviews, if you want to call them that, with the Angry Ginger. Like, he's got his trolls.
Right, Angry Ginger. That's well put. Right.
Yeah. that wasn't me that coined that. That was Ryan Dawson who did an interview with him after me. But
And did he find the same problem? Oh, thank you again, George.
exact same, yeah.
And George has got the Trivium logo up for his avatar. Cool. Thanks for that, George.
I wanted to ask you about the program you use, the brain research.
Yeah.
Could you share your screen and go on that real quick? I want my
Sure.
audience to see that.
Yeah, I'll share a screen so we can all do that. And sorry if it creates a weird feedback loop thingy. All right. So here we go. Yeah, that'll actually work okay. All right. There we go. You should be getting that now. Thanks, Anthony.
And you can just search any name and it'll show you all the connections you have in that crazy little universe you have there.
Well, I started putting this together in 2007, I think. And originally I tried to use mind map software, one of those, and I wasn't happy with it. And then someone introduced me to this software. And the first data point in there was this one right here, Gordon Wasson. That was the very first data point. Now there's probably 10,000 or more in there. But I started that in early 2007. Thanks, Polygonal. And just continued plugging data in as I researched. And, so the database is actually current. It's always up to date to what I'm working on in the present. And
this is shareable. People can access all of your information here, right?
Right.
Correct?
So I'll just show people on the website here. So if they go to the logosmedia.com website, and if you click on the brain right here, you can actually you can click on the online version here, or it'll just pull up in a little window here. The online version up here is better, full online screen version. That'll open up all the way. And then for paying members, as soon as I get around to it, I'll put up a downloadable version for those who have 3-month or more renewable subscriptions under the memberships. I was putting it out for free for like 8 or 9 years, but it just, I need to be able to help fund and the research and whatnot. So
from my channel, I've been doing a lot of research into like Trump and Zionism in America and, Jewish control over America and that kind of thing. And would you say that the Zionists that surround Trump and that are obsessed with rebuilding the temple and all this end times prophecy, does the Royal Society mix in with them at all, or are they just total different factions?
I suspect as much. Oops, what am I typing? Royal, not rich. Royal Society. Yeah, there is a lot of overlap. So you have Julian Huxley was one of the presidents, or Thomas Henry Huxley was one of the presidents of that. Charles II of England, who was brought into power after Charles I of England was regicides, and by Cromwell and his gang. They were all involved in the Invisible College, which goes into the Royal Society. Rosicrucianism up here. This guy Robert Boyle right here. You see a lot of people like to regurgitate what they learned from the peer review system or the scientific method. Both of those were created by the Royal Society to control the academic dialogue. Caleb Thomas, who's in the Logos Roundtable, he came on recently to present the rational scientific method. And, of course, the trivium method replaces peer review. The peer review system is the logical fallacy of ad verecundiam, or the appeal to authority. So rather than thinking and verifying citations yourself, you need a peer group to tell you what to think. So that is actually a system of control, and that's how the academic system controls the official narrative that's put out mostly by the Royal Society, which then bleeds down into Tavistock, SRI, the CIA, and all of their shills. And I suspect that most tenured professors are on the take, because if you're a tenured professor, you're utilizing the peer review system to keep dissenting views out, and that means that you are probably on the take to have your job.
Well, where does Karl Marx? So what are some of Karl Marx's connections that you have in there?
Well, Royal Society member,
Yeah.
major red flag right there, of course, creates communism. Communism is essentially the same thing as Zionism. They're basically one and the same.
Right.
So,
Well, look at all of the kibbutz in Israel. They're all like communist based, right?
Right. So, he influences the Frankfurt School, socialism, etc. Socialism is just soft Marxism or soft communism. It's just for those who aren't quite ready for communism. They give you socialism to warm you up. So like all you British and all that are into your socialism, you're being fooled by the Marxists and the Royal Society and the Tavistock Institute and all these guys.
You had APAC up there. You had Zionism and APAC.
Oh, where do you see that? Let's see.
Oh,
here we go. Yeah, so there's Zionism. Yeah, that you end up. That's
oh boy, yeah, you got a lot of stuff there.
Thanks, Polygonal, for the $5. Oh, thank you, Bahare, again for your support. I always appreciate when you show up too and support. And there's like just a second. There's like 144 others of you in there who probably haven't supported tonight. But thanks to all of you who have. I really appreciate it. And thanks, I Belong in the Kitchen. Always appreciate your support too.
You're in your kitchen almost. So was that?
Yeah. Well, she loves being in the kitchen. She hates the feminists, so she's pretty cool.
Oh, I see. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So in all of these links here, you can click on these, and there's like articles and info on a lot of these.
Right.
Right.
And some of them you might need to type in, a Google search or whatever. Like my shows with Jacob Duelman, we did a lot. Exposing this guy, Sir Victor Gallant, and he's part of the Fabians, and they publish a lot of the fake, misleading stuff. The Left Book Club, and then they promote it into the Christian Book Club. So they're basically putting, when you read the Bible, you realize the left or the left-hand path is always Satanism, and the communist, that's the left, that's all of that stuff. And then they promote that stuff into the Christian groups, tricking the Christians in it. The Christians, how they get the Christians is the Christians, they're supposed to follow truth and worship truth, but without the trivium, because of the good-naturedness of most of them, they get duped easily. So they end up getting suckered into believing a lot of this stuff. Like, oh well, we should just accept homosexuality and transgender and trans this and trans that, and but Julian Huxley is who came up with transhumanism. And for
I've heard also that the Talmud. I saw an article with a transgendered girl, and she was like, "Yeah, and I checked out my Jewish roots, and the Talmud says that there's 6 genders, so I felt like I was had support from my religion." And I'm like, oh boy, Talmud says 6 genders.
Yeah, well, and birthing the new man through the center of the Star of David rather than through truth. So that's the whole gig there. And of course,
I haven't heard about that, birthing man through the center of the Star of David.
Yeah, that's a whole other. I have this image called Everything. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah,
it looks like you're creating like an artificial intelligence of bad guys or something.
And this is an image. I forget. This was James's temple, whatever, in Israel is where they found this. But what you can see is that the menorah and Star of David have subverted Christianity in that logo up there. And, it's I could do a whole hour or two show, and I have on this thing, but that the menorah is the false light, and then the light of truth is the true light, the light of truth, get it? True light. Mm-hmm. Darkness is deception. But so rather than birthing the new man through the light or the yoni, the fish is also the yoni, that's the symbolism of the yoni, etc., you're going to birth it through the center of the Star of David to create the ultimate slave, essentially. And out of the center, you have evil on one side and good on the other. You have logos on one side, deception on the other. So when you birth someone through the center, you're essentially promoting moral relativism and that there is no good or bad. So that is the agenda that you see going on right now, all of these claims that there is no good, no bad, etc.
That's the whole theme of Game of Thrones, which is a Jewish producer, Jewish writers. All the characters, like
wow,
even
look at all the support coming in all of a sudden. Thank you so much, everybody. Sorry for that.
No problem. But yeah, the author of Game of Thrones always talks about how with his characters, none of them are really truly evil or truly good, and they're all kind of in the middle. And what you were talking about just reminds me of like thesis and antithesis and the Hegelian dialectic. Always,
well, and when you think about that, so let's think about that for a minute. I'm glad you brought that up. So, what is always first? Thesis. So, how do you have antithesis before thesis? Or let me put that another way. How would the Old Testament be before the New Testament? In my opinion, logos would have to be before anti-logos. You'd have to have truth before the rejection of truth. And I posted a quote about that on Facebook last week. I was reading the Zohar. I got a set so that I could start it's like Sun Tzu, you got to know your enemy, right? So, let me just see if I can find.
Was that expensive to get how do you get a copy of the Zohar? Is that on Amazon?
It was pricey. Somebody donated it, but let me see here if I can find it. Oh, good grief! So I'm not seeing it now, but I posted on my Facebook page a couple weeks ago. But it's basically that all lies have a foundation of truth first. So even the liars, even the Satanists, have to first acknowledge truth. And then they
subvert it.
And then or they stack the lies on top of it to bury it, or they subvert it or invert it. They use Kabbalistic inversion, right?
That's what we've done to the ADL. They invert the truth, and they say any white people that want to organize or defend or point out their supremacy, that we're white supremacists. So I inverted their lies and took their logo and changed it to Goyim to appropriate their derogatory term towards us, so we can start up conversations and raise awareness that they think of us as inferior, as Goyim, as our, here to serve them and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I like that. And George just kicked in again. Thanks again, buddy. But
have you heard of that? The GDL?
Well, I've heard about it through you, and I've watched, some of your, in fact, I probably wasn't even really aware of it until your show last week with, Oren, right?
Owen, yeah.
Or Owen, yeah, sorry. So, and that was when I saw it, I was like, maybe I should get Adam to send me one of those or something, or get one from you. But
so I knew you'd be on board. Anybody that recognizes the Jewish supremacy and doesn't like the way that the ADL wants to call everybody a supremacist, that points out their supremacy. It's a double standard and hypocrisy.
Yeah. Oh, you're a racist for pointing out our racism. How dare you point out our racism? And
you hate that we're racist and think that you're inferior.
People call me a racist because I've exposed in the past, Jewish anti-Germanicism and anti-gentilism, etc. And it's like, no, I'm not. I have a close Jewish friend, and now he gets what Logos is, and he has backed away from it because he sees that it's not about living in truth, but it's like, as soon as you get it and get what it's about, you either drop the satanic worship and all the left stuff. That's what the left is. I mentioned that earlier. And you go through it, you get the left-hand path and the right-hand path. The right-hand path is living in truth. The left-hand path is Satanism. That's the left. That's the political left as well. Of course, both of them get corrupted. But the middle path, if you read Revelation 3:15-16, the middle path, which would be the moderate or the middle of the road fallacy, it's the middle of the road lie. It's if a half a lie is still a lie. But the Revelation 3:15-16 compare it to vomit. So you have vomit and the left and the right. And God doesn't want you to be in vomit. God says, he'll spew you out of his mouth if you're a moderate. So Satanism is less bad than being a moderate, or be on the right-hand path and live in truth. So that's basically what it all breaks down to, It's like you've got, simply there, it's kind of an oversimplification, but there's really two religions. There's truth and there's lies. And all of the religions fall into those two categories. It's like when you're reading texts, are they focused on truth, living in truth, telling you repeatedly, this is truth, be in truth, be righteous, be correct, think. If they're doing that, that's a true religion. If it's not, if it's telling you to go fornicate in the mud to your rock idols, it's probably a fake. If it's telling you go be high in the Amazon jungle and you need this drug to be spiritual, it's probably fake.
Or go sacrifice some animals and do some circumcisions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and don't forget to bring them oil.
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned
and then
earlier,
the moil would connect to adrenochrome and vampirism, and that is using adrenaline in blood to cause some sort of experience that they have, and it's not a DMT rush, it's adrenochrome. And so this is why you see the elites using blood and young blood, these blood treatments, getting blood infusions and stuff like this. That's what it's about. They want the young blood. It's vampirism. That's what vampirism really is, in my opinion. It is adrenochrome, and that's what it's about. So, I posted last week on my Facebook page that blood and all of that will become a key issue in the coming months. Candor says I'm interrupting a lot.
No, you're not. You shared an article this week on Facebook called "Who's a Jew? Trump Admin Redefines Jewishness and Breaks Obama's Stonewall on Rutgers Case."
Yeah.
What is this the redefining of what it means to be Jew? So you don't have to be a Jew anymore, and by religion,
right?
just by
You're right. Well, see, it's a false ethnicity, and I interviewed years ago Professor Shlomo Sand from the University of Tel Aviv, Israel, who wrote a book called The Invention of the Jewish People, and he exposes that the idea of a Jewish ethnicity was manufactured in the early mid-1700s, but obviously there are black Jews, there are Slavic Jews, there are different Jews, but what it means to be Jewish, philosophically speaking, is to reject logos. It's not an ethnicity, it's a state of denying truth as God. And so anybody technically, it's like if you read like John 1-7, the word is God. The word, when we get in there and we look at it, that's logos. So logos is the word, is reason, is truth. So anybody who rejects that, rejects truth as God, they are Jewish.
So it's not if you reject that Jesus died for your sins and was the Son of God. That's not what it means to be a Christian.
But when you get that truth, God is truth, and that to teach truth to human beings, somebody had to go and teach it. So that's why Jesus is the Son of God, and it had to be pure to not be defiled.
Because he spoke the truth.
Because he spoke the truth, right? And then Jesus represents the man on earth who lived in truth more than anyone else. He was more meek, more humble, more pure, more uncorrupted than, that was a misstatement, less corrupted than anybody else out there. So he set the example for men to live by, to lead our families, right? So he was basically the ultimate alpha male who taught living in truth. And he was just giving us an example. He's sort of like, teaching you, it's sort of like your owner's manual. Here's all of the crap, here's all of the tricks that they're going to use against you, and here's how to get through it. And by the way, Revelation 3, if you get through all of the tricks of the Jews, you can sit on God's throne with Jesus and, slap a high five or whatever at the end, And so, and it, it lays all of this out. So those of you who haven't read Revelation 3, it's all laid out in there. It's pretty, it's pretty clear. You're going to get your name on one of the pillars in the temple of God, and you're going to sit on God's throne with Jesus because you got past all of the tricks of the Jews. So, is it anti-Semitism to talk about this stuff? And of course that's what they always spin it to, because they don't want us talking about it. So they have to redefine the word, and tell us that, talking about this stuff is anti-Semitism. And,
is the term anti-Semitism a logical fallacy?
It would be, let me see. You're an anti-Semite would be an ad hominem. But it's just a catch-all phrase. But, it's like this interview I did with Shlomo Sand. So here's a Jewish professor from the University of Tel Aviv, Israel, with his own book discussing how a Jewish ethnicity is an invention. So it's not me being anti-Semitic. It is the facts and the truth. So people can go in there and they can, listen to that, and check it out. And I've interviewed Rabbi David Weiss from Neturei Karta. They're extremely anti-Zionist, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Neturei Karta rabbis believed that truth was God. But in Revelation 3:9, it says the synagogue of Satan and those who claim they are Jews but are not. So then that must mean that there are real Jews out there somewhere.
Yeah, I heard that argument from a Jewish guy, a Shlomo, that I had a debate with. And I'm like, oh, it's a good point. If there's fake Jews,
there are absolutely real Jews out there. And in fact, it may be, this is just speculation, it may be that and here's another theory I have that's going to upset a lot of people. Judaism didn't come before Christianity. Judas betrayed Jesus, and then Judaism came after Christianity. The Judaism. So you reject logos or truth, just like Judas did and betrayed Jesus, betrayed truth, and then goes out, and so if you think of, Matthew 4, Jesus is tempted on the mountain by Satan to get all the kingdoms, of the world if he just bows to Satan, and he rejects that. Well, did all of them reject it? Well, you have the Jews who claim to be, the managers of the world, and they're better and smarter than all of us. Did they lie? Did they accept Satan's offer in Matthew 4? Somebody must have accepted it. And then so you have the betrayal and whatnot, and even the money that Judas was given when he tried to give it back, they were like, no, we can't even put that money in the temple. It's so corrupt.
Yeah,
so
Christ
real
is
Jews,
Christian follower of Christ.
Right, real Jews do exist. But the thing is they might be white Europeans and who call themselves Christian now. But when you get back into what was the house of Israel, it wasn't the Israel that we think of today, the Zionist place in Palestine. It was probably Tartary, and Tartary spanned most of the northern hemisphere, and that's a whole other issue. At least most of the northern hemisphere in Europe and Siberia. But, we're starting to think that, that Tartary probably expanded to most of Northern America as well.
So how long do you usually do your shows? I just
it's about time to wrap it up, like right here.
Okay, I had one last question I wanted to. I brought it up.
I didn't even bring any up for you, so we'll have to.
I know
do this
it's
again.
okay. I've been wanting to. I've been asking for interviews for a while, and I'm so glad that we finally got to do one. I want to talk a little bit about trolls in the comments. Have some of the techniques and tactics that they use against us to try to undermine us. What are some of the ones that you've been noticing? One that I've been seeing is that people that I've never seen before will comment. Well, do you read a lot of comments, first of all?
Usually I do. Today I managed to read like a couple, and I apologize for everybody who posted up super chats and I didn't get to them at all. John
not even
says,
just live stream.
Yeah, John says you should go on Red Elephant's live stream, Jan, and do this same show, more exposure. And Polygonal, thanks again, and thanks to all of you who supported. I didn't mean to ignore all your super chats tonight. We just, Adam and we just started flowing here. So I wrote an article. Let me pull it up here. And
about trolls?
How to identify and remove Facebook trolls, gang stalkers, and disinfo agents. And I'll just, here, you know what? Let me share a screen again. Sorry about that.
So some tactics I've been noticing, somebody that I've never seen before will show up and say, I'm unsubscribing. This is awful. I'm unsubscribing, to try to kind of persuade other people to unsubscribe.
Right. So what you'll see, like on Facebook, you see those stupid meme images, and here, let me just stop that. And, they're those stupid cliche meme images like veganism or, and they always use appeal to emotion of some sort. Those are usually trolls that spread those types of images around. You can go through a Facebook page and you'll see that they never have any original content. It's always these stupid meme images, like every single post, over and over and over ad infinitum. It's usually some commie vegan, give up your guns or whatever type of stuff, and you gotta, come with us into the new world order type of thing. But when you, I don't know any trolls in the chat tonight to give an example of. I think my wife deleted a few already. But what you can do, and what I usually do, is you're going to, each time you see these posts, what you're going to do is you're going to want to go to their channel. And usually they're going to have no content in their channels. It's going to be a brand new account. They're not going to have any videos uploaded. They might have 3 or 4 friends that are usually their own links to their own channels or whatever. And then, so what they're going to do is they're going to create these multiple ghost accounts, and then they're going to say this stuff, and then they'll even change and log into a different account and then answer themselves and do these tactics. So the first thing that you, and I just hit the cord here, muted myself. First thing you should do is go and check their channel. And then when you see this type of account, that's 90% of the time it's a red flag. Sometimes it's just somebody that doesn't want to be out in public or whatever, but generally speaking, those are troll accounts. You'll see they have almost no favorites, or the account was just created, or they have no uploads, etc. They have nothing to contribute. There's no original content, no original thought. And then you'll see that, they repeat these same types of tactics. So then instead of trying to deal with them on a first, on a one-on-one basis, reasonable basis, you can go in and just say, oh, it's a fake account. And do that on Facebook too. Check each account and make sure, are they posting all of the stupid cliche images? Are they using all of the tactics that I exposed in that article that I did on trolls, gang stalkers, etc.? And so if you see that, like Kurt Doolittle, he's a contractor for the CIA. He likes to go around and promote all of this anti-government stuff and anti-natural law, anti-Bible stuff, and then he'll show up and he'll troll my accounts. But he's a stupid CIA contractor, and he actually thinks I don't recognize him and his tactics when he shows up, and he's got all of these followers and, all these yahoos that think he's this great guy. But he always uses the same tactics, and he'll always create a fake account. And he'll write something long and intellectual, and it'll sound like sense, but it's always the same, tactics that he's using to do this stuff. And it's like, all right, Kurt Doolittle, all right, Megan Usui, all right, you gang of trolls, I see you. And, and so you can just start checking their profiles rather than engaging first. Another thing that I've noticed is, and you have to be careful because there are willful dupes and there are trolls who hide with the willful dupes. The trolls always hide with stupid. Okay, so and I don't mean to be mean to the public out there who's just waking up, but a troll will hide with the crowd of everybody and say, see, he's stupid, and they'll point over there and they'll say, well, you're wrong, and they'll try to rile up the normals out there to think like them, and they'll be the loudest one of the normal. So there is a process that you can go through to figure out, and I almost sent the CIA a bill a couple years ago because they were sending me so many trolls, and I was realizing that they were using me to train these pieces of you-know-what. So, after a while, it was like, okay, well, most people who are willful dupes will begin to ask questions and be reasonable after 15 to 25 exchanges. A troll, they're like, most of them, and there's different levels of them. Some of them would be, I've dealt with trolls that were Harvard educated, that worked at the White House, all the way down to your, simpleton. I flunked out of high school, and I'm reading a list here like a telemarketer, bottom feeder types, right? The real stupid morons of the earth. And so what the moron troglodyte trolls do is they have a list in front of them that just says ridicule, lie, name call, repeat. And it doesn't matter if you go to 50 or 70 exchanges with that person and they're still using that same limited intellect, that is a troll,
Did you see the Snowden leaks? There was something from GCHQ with some slides about online propaganda, and it was the one of the slides says that they're what they follow online to infiltrate and subvert chat conspiracy groups is the 4 Ds: deny, degrade, disrupt, and deceive.
Yeah,
so
I have. I think that's linked in the article down here, like down in the notes on this page. And you know what? I'm only showing that to my side. Let me share that again. So
I included it in my documentary as well, the conspiracy theory conspiracy, as well as like the Cass Sunstein cognitive infiltration. And they said KTLA, I think it was, said that the 2016 election, 20% of all the activity on Twitter was bot activity.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And a lot of them aren't bots either. A lot of them are paid.
Sophisticated propaganda. Yeah.
Hillary Clinton had to hire a lot of trolls to try to prop herself up for her campaign. Her satanic.
Another one that I notice is people always will say, "Oh, this is a clickbait title." They want to do anything they can in the comments to get people to not click on the video and see what's in there. So they'll completely lie about what we cover in the video, or they'll say like, "Oh, this is nothing but a Jew hater," or those kind of things.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Laugh, ridicule, deny. I mean, liars don't really have that many tricks. And once you realize that, if you memorize the basic logical fallacies, like if you memorize, there's about 24, 25 of the most common basic logical fallacies. You don't need to get into like the true Scotsman fallacy or something. That's a little more advanced. But if you focus like on ad hominem, appeal to emotion, appeal to ridicule, the horse laugh, you're wrong because that's their whole argument. They don't have a brain cell beyond that. That
I got a guy who refuses to debate me because he says I'm too crazy. So he talks all this trash about me, but says I'm too crazy to debate him. So it's like declaring victory before it starts with like a cop-out excuse.
Right. Well, and that's an ad hominem attack. He ad hominems you and ridicules you and then claims victory. But, to avoid these types, memorize at minimum, folks, and it'll take you, maybe 2 months to memorize 25 of the most basic fallacies. Go to triviumeducation.com, click on the trivium part. There's a fallacy page on there. Memorize at least 25 of those, and then you'll be protected from the most basic common lies. And when you watch TV, if you do, use the commercials to, as a test, to spot the fallacy. When you're listening to the radio driving down the freeway, you and your friends in the car, there's this shampoo will get you girls, appeal to flattery type of fallacies and things like that. And then you can begin to see these things.
About persuasion, and they were teaching you all the persuasion tactics so that you don't get persuaded.
Oh, Adam, you're so smart. You're so cool, man. I want to be, buddy, man. You do such amazing work. You're just, you're the guy out there who we should all be copying and paying attention to. And you're so smart and brilliant and good looking, and and then so they'll butter you up to gain your trust, right? So that you put your guard down. You were just
saying nice things about me. You had me confused. Sorry, I was like, oh, this is nice. Thank you, Jan.
See, so that's exactly how it works, and so that's how they would use it to build up your trust, using the appeal to flattery, right? So Pete just called it in the chat. He got it right. You can prove your preference. Got it. So let's see. Jan should do more pop-up fallacy videos. See, the issue with those was that the idea was for the public to create those to help themselves learn logical fallacies by identifying them and then submitting them to me to put up on the Pop-Up Fallacies website so that we could all, learn from the fallacies that you learned. Unfortunately, in the 7 or 8 years that website has been up, not one person ever submitted a pop-up fallacy video, and they wanted me to do all the work. And I started to turn, who's that woman from Australia that claims to be a pedophile victim and all of that? Barnett, what's her name? Barnett, Fiona Barnett. I've been turning her interview that I did with her about 2 years ago into a pop-up fallacy video. I need to finish that, but
Wouldn't the world just be so much of a better place if everybody knew the trivium and we taught the trivium in school and everybody knew these logical fallacies inside and out? Like, could you imagine? But then the puppeteers and the architects wouldn't be able to get away with what they get away with.
Thank you, Polygonal and Gokuchi. Yeah, exactly. It levels the playing field. That's the point of the trivium. That's why you see so many people attacking it. I get people who've never studied it who will tell me, the trivium method is wrong and the scientific method far outdoes it. No, you have to know the grammar you're dealing with. You have to check it for logical inconsistencies. A contradiction is always a lie or an error. There are no contradictions in nature. So, logic is the art of non-contradictory identification. So first, you have to know the parts of the research you're dealing with. You have to know if there's any contradictions or lies in it. You have to be able to explain it. And then you can take it into the scientific method. It's a prerequisite. So, you get these people that, I had one this week, this guy, Sean, another one down in Australia, attacking me. Oh, the scientific method far supersedes the trivium. Well, if these people had the brains to study the trivium method, they would see that the scientific method is discussed in the study materials on the Trivium Education website. And then Caleb Thomas and I, a couple of months ago, went into depth in the rational scientific method, which far exceeds the stupid Royal Society's bogus scientific method. That's about as equivalent as the peer review system, and it's just a closed loop with logical inconsistencies that they use to control people's ability to think.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate when people say, "Oh, is it peer reviewed? Why isn't it peer reviewed then?" It's complete. It's a racket.
So when somebody asks me that, so you need somebody else to tell you what to think? You need somebody else to check the citations for you and tell you if the citations are correct or not? That's what you need. You need to be handheld, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have any self-esteem, so you need a professor, somebody in a white coat, to tell you what to think. You need the CIA to tell you what to think. That's what you're telling
Appeal to authority?
That's the adveracunium.
Did I get it? Oh, yeah. What is appeal to authority? Sorry.
Yeah, that's the adveracunium fallacy. It's an appeal to authority. Yeah. So, I put on a white coat or whatever, and people will do this to me all the time, and I try to be gentle with them because, people who don't have the trivium yet lack a lot of self-esteem, and they'll call me cocky and, blah, 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 you're so cocky and this and that. Well, no, it's confidence. I had this guy, Chad, a couple of weeks ago attack me because I'm confident in the research that I did and decades of research that I've done that he hadn't done, and he wanted to contribute his opinion even though he hadn't researched anything, and how his opinion was just as valid as ours even though he hadn't researched any of the points he was making and couldn't substantiate any of them. So your self-esteem will grow when you learn to fact check things because for a fact that something is true or false. You've checked it, you've verified it, you've looked at the citations. You're not going by what somebody else tells you to think. You're confident and competent to check things yourself. You don't need someone else to tell you what to think. Why should I believe some schmuck from the Royal Society who's trying to tell me some garbage to believe? We're descended from monkeys. It's the more I look at this whole thing, we descend to monkeys, not the other direction. And that's a whole other issue.
You think we're evolving to be more like monkeys?
We're devolving. Yeah, I think evolution is a complete inversion. But that's a whole other issue. One of these days we'll have to do the most taboo show of all, the blood of the lamb.
Oh, that's coming up soon?
Maybe one of these days. I'll have to put together a hardcore team to pull that show off.
I'll look forward to that one. It sounds,
and it's like if I've done the research and I've dug through the university archives and pulled all these people's personal letters and gone through Gordon Wass and stuff, why do I need a bunch of guys in white coats to tell me what research says that they didn't do?
Mm-hmm. They're not even telling you, right? They're trying to avoid addressing any of the points and attacking you on a personal level.
Oh yeah. Well, that's, but even then, but still, even with the adveracunium fallacy, they want you to appeal to them to tell you what to think about research you did yourself. It's just,
Right. Yeah.
it gets ridiculous.
Yeah. Here, I got a couple of these, and then you about ready to close it out. Let me just read these so the super chatters are happy. Great guest, says Alpha G. Jesuits and crypto Jews, Jehovah or Yahweh is Satan, and super communism is their agenda. From Frank Goldman. Go down the rabbit hole on Ryan Dawson. Oh, they're talking about another guest. Was he gatekeeping for himself or somebody else? I had a 9/11 researcher on the show recently, Ryan Dawson, and he doesn't believe that there was bombs in the building on 9/11. So there's a lot of people upset at him right now.
Let me read this comment, this super chat from John Crucy. He says, "You deserve the support, bro. You have helped a lot of people. We appreciate you. Thanks." That's really sweet, John. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody who's, super chats, Polygonal, John, all of you folks, for support.
You know what I admire about you, Jan, is that on so many aspects of your research, you were like totally in one belief state, and you were able to admit you were wrong, admit you were duped, and then switch over to the other side and the truth. And there's so many people out there that refuse to admit they're wrong, and that, they're embarrassed, that they're like, oh, people will think I'm dumb, that I used to be wrong.
Here's another good one I've heard, actually. If you admit your earlier research was wrong because you've gone deeper into the grammar and learned logical fallacies, learned the trivium, and figured stuff out, if you were ever mistaken once before, well, then you shouldn't be believed now. So they'll use a sweeping generalization fallacy, right? Yeah. And so or a hasty generalization or poisoning the well. Everything Adam Green says is
they were wrong.
Everything Adam Green says is wrong because when he was 5, he believed in Santa Claus. This is the kind of, stuff that the crazies will throw at you. But
it's the people that never admit they were wrong that are the real people you shouldn't be trusting.
Exactly right. And so if you can admit you're wrong, see, when you realize that there are no contradictions in nature, that a contradiction is always, without exception, a lie or an error. It doesn't mean when you find a contradiction, it doesn't mean that you throw your arms up in the air and say opinions are like a you-know-what. All it means is you need to dig further down into the research until there are no more contradictions. And when you get to that point, when there are no more contradictions, when you hit that point, that's when you have the aha, the epiphany, the boom, oh, I get it. And so, when you memorize the logical fallacies, the first 2 months you memorize them. Then what happens is, as you're memorizing them, your brain starts going through and doing inventory of the knowledge in your own mind. And have I fact-checked this? Who, what, where, when, why, or how? And if you haven't gone through that process with each and everything you think you know, it's probably garbage. 80% of what most people think they know is crap. And so if you just go through this process, who, what, where, when, why, and how, you learn it in 3rd and 4th grade, and do an inventory of the thoughts of your own mind, you'll start discovering that most of what you know is false, and then you can start looking for the true information. And that is all I've done. It's not like I went off the deep end. I started fact-checking. Oh, Jan Irvin says Terrence McKenna was a CIA agent. Yeah, he was. He may have been FBI. He may have been FBI and CIA. But yes, he was. He sold the agenda. I've put out the research. He's in the database. People can search it. It's not just based on the one admission, which is a primary citation out of his own mouth that they recruited me, he said. It's all of the data points. He sells the agenda. He was scholar in residence at Esalen, a CIA front organization, when he made the comment. Hello. Scholar in residence. He wasn't just someone passing through. Dennis McKenna wouldn't have a single thing to hide about all of this, would he? Being Terrence's own brother. No, and Dennis being, complicit and participant in the whole thing. He wouldn't have any reason to lie, and we should just believe him and his slander video that he did on me, right? And
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, yeah. So, they tried to bait me at a, Free Your Mind conference a couple years ago and bring Dennis McKenna and me there together, and then they had this guy interview him and throw him all these softball baited questions and McKenna sat there saying, oh, I need my meds and I need all of this kind of stuff. I mean, it was just pure slander. But if you don't have the trivium, you're going to believe his appeals to ridicule and ad hominems and all of this stuff, rather than thinking, wait a second, Dennis is promoting the same agenda, and he's selling this stuff, and he's funded by the Rockefellers. Maybe he's complicit with his brother, since they were on those tours in South America together, writing some of the books together, doing some of that stuff together. Maybe they worked together. By golly.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, so, maybe he's not the best person to get to listen to when it comes to his legitimacy.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're going to appeal to, well, it's a begging the question fallacy, essentially.
Well, what's one of your most favorite fallacies that most people don't know about? Because, you know, everybody knows red herring, straw man, ad hominem. Like, those are the big three you hear all the time. I know there's a appeal to populists, like if everybody believes something.
A million Frenchmen are usually wrong, you know.
Well, what's another one that maybe, you know,
I've identified a number of new fallacies myself, and when you really get into it, you'll start, you know, identifying them on your own. But one fallacy that I identified, and my wife has started identifying fallacies now too. She's like super smart. But like the double wrap fallacy is one of mine. So it's a fallacy where a lie is wrapped inside of another lie. And then it took me a while to figure out how they did it. I was probably thinking of this for 2 or 3 years before I figured out how they could do it. But then I wanted to know how many lies you could wrap inside other lies, right? And so then how would you mark each lie? Because once you go so far, you lose control. You have to have an identifying marker, right? So then I figured out what they do is they use a generational marker, right? So, you know, one generation will have one lie, you know, I don't know, it could be about 9/11 or whatever, you know, but, you know, so they'll use, you know, like the 9/11 official story, and that'll be one lie, and it's wrapped inside a lie, and it's the Arabs over here. Look over here at the Arabs. And then so the next generation, they're going to come along, you know, the next group of Zionists, and they're going to want to one up the last group. Like the Salem lie way back in 1692, that was one major, but let's see how big a witchcraft spell we can really do this time. And so what they're going to do is they're going to use a generational marker, and then when they hit that generational marker each generation, then they know it's a new part of the lie, and then they can start to dissect it and know how to add to it. So each generation, like the Huxley family, for instance, each generation will just come and add to the previous Huxley family's crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it makes sense, because if you do too many lies on one generation, they might be able to figure it out that it's not adding up quite right.
Well, right,
and they brought up from a young age and indoctrinated with a certain belief, then it's harder to overcome it.
Well, and they do these plans multi-generationally too. So if you want to see how they do it, you have to understand the double wrap fallacy. But you know, in the database, you can look up fallacies as well. Oops.
Okay, cool.
And I've got a bunch in there. Let's see. Circle jerk fallacy. That's identified by Jan Irvin, revealing how intelligent cells and networks operate by creating a network of interlocking cells. Each cell has 2 to 3 or more members, and each may connect to another related cell. In academic cells, the process is used to keep out dissenting opinions. But you know, so you can get in there into the database, and I'm not sharing it. So
that's like a fake panel that they have on cable news. It's like, oh, there's 5 people up there, and they're pretending to argue both sides, but really it's a fake
right.
theater.
Well, you know, and I'm just showing some of the fallacies up here, and you can go through these, like any that my wife and I have figured out that we've identified ourselves are in the database here for people.
Kabbalistic inversion. Can you tell us about that one? I just got a super chat that says, use the gematria and Kabbalah against them. They're indoctrinated in Talmud Kabbalah at an early age. And I would say I'd throw in the Zora too. Is that I'm saying it right?
Yeah, we did a show or two on Kabbalistic Zohar. We did a show or two on Kabbalistic inversion. But, you know, the Star of David itself, if you see this image here in the top right, oops, I didn't mean to highlight it like that, that it's showing the Star of David, but what it is showing is it's reflected. So the top is reflecting the bottom, but that is actually a symbol of Kabbalistic inversion there. And so you're taking everything and you're inverting it to its opposite and making people believe, I'll just put us in a little window over here, making people believe that that it's true when it's inverted. It's the lie is directly inverted. It's flipped upside down. So, you have to flip it back right side up to see how the fallacy works. And people will accuse me of being an agent. It's like, why would I put out the very method to fact check all of my work and to spot all of my lies if I was dirty? How stupid would that be? And I put out the trivium, and it'll be 9 years next month.
You were just talking about something that reminded me of David Icke.
And I was just going to explain another fallacy, and I forgot. Sorry.
Okay. Well, the David Icke, he talks about like these, and even Alex Jones has said this kind of thing, like these parasites, these ultra-dimensional creatures that are like, controlling the reptilians or whatever, that they can't create on their own. So they're only able to like twist and invert the truth, like with their lies. So it was kind of reminding me of that sort of
to me, well, it goes along with the Hegelian dialectic or whatever, but it's a simple-minded type of fallacy. It's like, we're going to take everything you build up and we're going to tear it down. It's like the moron at the beach who goes around kicking over sandcastles and thinking he's built something. That's how I look or view the inversion fallacy when I think of it conceptually.
You had Dugan connected to the Kabbalistic inversion. Do you know off the top of your head what that connection was?
I don't remember what that was. Let's see.
A lot of my friends are real concerned with Dugan and his multipolar world order with Russia and China and Israel, like building a new economy.
I looked into that a while ago, and now I don't remember why I put him under an inversion fallacy. I don't remember off the top of my head. This guy here.
I wouldn't expect you to. That's a whole nother artificial brain in there.
Dugan's Evil Theology. Didn't he write a book on Satanism or something like that? The Perils.
I know he wrote a book about like causing racial division in America, or at least had a quote in there about wanting to do that.
Yeah, but when I read that article or whatever, I pegged him as an inversion specialist. And most people, most counterintelligence agents, they only have a few fallacies, one or two or three that they specialize in, and it's like when I, pointed out Owen's fallacies, it's like he's got his, red herring and straw man.
Appeal to ridicule, yeah.
Right, and then he uses name calling and appeal to ridicule. But the red herring and the straw man are similar. The red herring is like, somebody asks you a question, you're like, well, when I was a little boy, let me tell you.
He started talking about the T-shirt. He started explaining the conspiracy about his T-shirt being a pentagon, and I didn't even bring that up or want to talk about that. So that's kind of like a or a straw man attack.
Obama's favorite fallacy. Most presidents, most politicians, one of their favorite fallacies is the straw man. So they'll or the red herring, and it's like you ask Obama a question or whomever the politician is, and you ask them point blank, and they'll say, well, let me tell you a story. When I was a little boy, I was out by the lake with my grandfather, and we caught this really big red herring, and, I'll go off on this story, and then they'll say, now, did that answer your question? And then you're so befuddled, you're like, And a straw man fallacy, what they're doing is they're taking your argument and they repackage it, they change some things, and then they attack that argument that they've changed, and then they pretend it's your argument. It's a straw man.
That's what they do to me. They say, oh, you say Jews are behind everything and Jews control the whole world and it's all the Jews are the problem. And it's like, no, I'm not saying any of that stuff. The truth is that you guys cover up all of that stuff completely, and I'm just covering all the stuff out there that I see, that I can back up and stuff.
Yeah.
It's all spin. Okay, I got 2 more super chats, and you about ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, there's people throw me some super chats on this side too. Much appreciated, man. I really appreciate all the support tonight.
Let's read all of ours out before they can get us any more, or else we'll never end the chat. I'm sure that's a problem sometimes. I got one. Ben Vargas says, tell Jan to accept my Facebook request. I love his intellectual skills, as do I. Thank you for everything you do. We love you, Adam. KGB defectors warned about this.
Who is that person?
That wanted to friend request you?
Yeah.
Ben Varga.
All right.
I don't know.
Done, Ben, you've been added. And, for most people that send me friend requests, unless I have time to go through every one and see if you have the stupid cliche images or the stupid porn star images or the stupid this or that or no original content on any of your posts, I won't add you. Sometimes it's a year or two before I get to you. Best way to get me to add you would be to send me an email or a chat, and eventually I might see the chat message since it's not usually with the normal messages I check. But, it's not that I'm ignoring you. It just, I get so many friend requests and so many trolls and this kind of stuff. It's hard to add. So Ben has been added.
Facebook requests are awful.
Ben just skipped past the whole wait list.
Yeah.
Thanks,
okay, 2 more. Keep up the great work, Adam. Please give a shout out to Goy Talk. It's a talk show calling out the Jays. Great guest too. I've heard of Goy Talk, and then Gillette Sharp, $2. Okay, so I'm all caught up. You got all yours read?
Are we in the clear? Polygonal Construction just threw in another $4.99. Thank you, sir, for that. Thanks anybody else, everyone else. I'm sorry I didn't keep up on the chat tonight. Wow, 2 hours tonight, and I've hardly had a chance to look up at it. So. But thanks, everybody, for your support. It's been a great show. It was good having you on, Adam. Thanks for, jumping on last minute. And
of course, wanted to do it for a while. So Jan Irvin at Logos Media is the YouTube and on Twitter.
And logosmedia.com and all
Trivium.
of that.
I was showing the websites up during the talk. And I'm at No More News on YouTube for people that want to find my work. And that's KNOW. Having more knowledge of the news is that's Trivium, right?
It is. That's your grammar phase.
Right. I'm all about the documentation, man. Everything I say has to be backed up several sources that in legitimate original sources.
And thanks, Alfega 1983 for the $5 super chat just now. Much appreciated. Thanks, everyone. Love you all.
Bye,
Much
guys.
appreciated, except for the trolls. Don't love you. Well, no, we got to love them too because, it's just...
I love the trolls the most. They're my favorite. They inspire me the most.
Yeah, they give me somebody to laugh at. It's like, well, I'm not you, so...
You don't lie. You'd be sad if you didn't have any trolls, Jan. You'd be like, why isn't anybody attacking me? That's how I would feel. My work must not be important or damaging enough if you're not getting attacked.
Yeah, well, there's that. All right, well... Thanks, everybody. Good night, everyone, and have a great evening.
See you in the next video, guys.